Welcome to The Explainer. So let's jump right into this. Today, we're taking a really hard look at a cost of cancer that honestly almost never makes the headlines. You know, when a cancer diagnosis hits, the conversation almost instantly pivots to money. We immediately think about the staggering hospital bills, the crazy expensive medications, deductibles, and all those out-of-pocket expenses that pile up literally overnight. But what we're going to explore today is a totally different kind of cost. We're talking about the massive, overwhelming toll a diagnosis takes on a patient's schedule. Because cancer doesn't just attack your body, it totally hijacks your calendar. And as you'll see, that loss of time is fundamentally linked to a massive loss of financial stability. It's kind of wild when you think about the stark contrast between what society sees and what the patient actually experiences. On one hand, you've got the recognized, tangible costs, right? You get an invoice for the hospital stay, you get a receipt for your meds, you see those insurance premiums coming right out of your paycheck. But flip the coin and look at the hidden costs. We're talking time, lost work hours, lost wages. This right here is the invisible burden. For patients and their families, all that time spent just sitting in waiting rooms, driving to clinics, recovering from treatments, it translates directly into a devastating financial drain. You aren't just paying for the treatment itself, you're literally paying with the hours you could have been spending earning a living. Section 1. Larry's Ledger. To really grasp the weight of this, let's examine a real-world example from the Larry Speakeasy community. Meet Larry Anderson, who was diagnosed with throat cancer in March of 2022.
So, following a total laryngectomy, Larry had to navigate radiation, chemotherapy, and physical therapy. And here's the thing, he meticulously tracked his hours. Let's break down these numbers together because they are pretty staggering. First up, 67 hours dedicated purely to radiation. Now, keep in mind, the actual treatment, it was only 10 to 15 minutes, but you have to factor in an hour's drive to the hospital and another hour back 5 days a week for 6 straight weeks. It adds up fast. Next, we have 48 hours for chemotherapy. That was a weekly 8-hour session during that exact same 6-week block. And finally, 40 hours for physical therapy, spread out over 10 weeks. When you add just those 3 categories up, Larry spent the equivalent of 4 full work weeks simply getting to, from, and sitting in appointments. And that totally excludes routine blood work, follow-up imaging, waiting room delays, or, just needing to rest at home. 4 entire work weeks completely vanished. Which brings us to Section 2, time equals lost wages. We've seen the medical timeline, but what do those lost hours actually mean for a family's livelihood? Let's look at this number, $8,000. Understanding where this figure comes from is absolutely crucial. See, when Larry and his wife went through this ordeal, they were fortunately already retired. His wife took on the role of primary caregiver, driving him to all those appointments. They actually had the time to give. But Larry asks us to imagine a very different yet super common scenario. What if they hadn't been retired? What if both of them were working standard hourly jobs, making, say, $25 an hour? Well, between Larry's grueling treatment schedule and his wife's required caregiving time, those missed work hours would equate to an $8,000 loss in wages, and that is just in a few short months. For families living paycheck to paycheck, a sudden $8,000 drop in income isn't just a hurdle. It is financially crushing. And sadly, this is the brutal reality for countless households out there. Because the patient often physically cannot drive themselves to these intensive treatments, the caregiver takes a massive hit. They're forced to burn through vacation time, exhaust their family leave, cut their weekly hours, or in a lot of cases, just quit their jobs entirely so they can ensure their loved one gets to those life-saving appointments safely. The financial bleeding is literally happening on 2 fronts at the exact same time. Moving on to Section 3, the ripple effect. It's not just about a few months of treatment. It's about how this massive time burden fundamentally alters career trajectories for years to come. And we can see this clearly through the stories shared by other members of the Larry Speakeasy community. Take a listen to this quote from Al Benjamin. He says, "My wife went from wife to caretaker. Again, our income was affected by her loss of income taking care of me." Al's story is particularly striking. He was an auctioneer. When he was diagnosed with throat cancer, he eventually lost his voice box. Now, for an auctioneer, losing your voice means instantly losing your livelihood. It's just gone. But the ripple effect didn't stop there. Because his recovery was so incredibly demanding, his wife had to step in as his full-time caretaker, which meant her income was wiped out too. They were hit by a total household income loss, and the whole shebang stemmed directly from the immense time and physical demands of cancer care. This kind of disruption can build over a staggering timeline. Just look at the harrowing journey of Michael Barnt and pay close attention to the span of these dates. In October 2014, Michael started experiencing voice loss and a sore throat.
After some initial missteps in his care, his journey dragged on for literally years. Jump to April 2016, and he's undergoing a massive 12-hour surgery at the University of Pennsylvania. For the next 2 years after that, he couldn't swallow anything. He had to rely on a feeding tube that took a full hour for every single feed. It wasn't until Thanksgiving of 2018, we're talking 4 full years after his initial symptoms, that he finally had his stomach tube pulled and could eat real food again. Just imagine the sheer volume of hours, days, and years pulled away from a normal working life to manage this. A 4-year disruption like that completely derails a career. Yet, right in the middle of Michael's incredibly long and difficult journey, there's actually a really powerful lesson about the role employers play. Michael shared, "My boss was incredible, kept me on the payroll for over 18 months. His employer did this specifically to make sure Michael maintained his health insurance during the absolute worst of his treatments." This is a stark contrast to the tragic stories we hear of people losing their jobs because they simply can't manage their treatment schedules. It beautifully illustrates what a massive, game-changing difference workplace support and accommodation can make for someone navigating a disease that demands this much of their time.
That brings us to our final section, Section 4, Systemic Solutions. Because highlighting the time burden of cancer isn't just about acknowledging the pain, right? It's about driving real, actionable change. If healthcare systems, employers, and policymakers truly recognize time as a severe financial cost of cancer, we could actually implement systems to alleviate this crushing burden. We're looking at 3 vital solutions here that directly address those lost hours we've been talking about today. First up, transportation assistance. Remember Larry driving 2 hours round trip for a quick 15-minute radiation session? Well, providing dedicated transportation for patients traveling long distances can immediately free up a caregiver to just stay at work. Second, telehealth appointments. For routine follow-ups that don't strictly require an in-person physical exam, telehealth is a total lifesaver. It eliminates hours of travel and waiting room time. Patients and caregivers can literally just log in during a lunch break instead of burning a whole day of PTO. And third, flexible work policies. Just like Michael's boss demonstrated, employers who offer flexible hours or protected leave allow families to balance their jobs with those relentless treatment schedules, all without the sheer terror of sudden financial ruin. So it really leaves us with one critical question to ask. Do you have time for cancer? It's not just a medical condition, it's a life condition, one that demands your days, your weeks, and your income. By fully understanding this hidden burden, we can all step up and become better advocates for solutions that ease the load on both patients and their caregivers. We absolutely need a more complete understanding of what this disease truly costs, far beyond just the medical bills. Because let's face it, in a world where time equals money, the cost of lost hours is simply too high to ignore. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope this gives you a completely new perspective on the true cost of care.